Family is a gift from God, a place where love takes root and faith grows stronger each day. It is within the family that we find comfort, support, and the deep connections that shape who we are. Through every joy and every challenge, we lean on one another, held together by love, grace, and shared faith. In moments of prayer, laughter, and even struggle, our hearts are reminded that God's presence lives within our homes and within each relationship we cherish. Family is more than blood. It is a bond of love, trust, and unwavering support. With faith at the center, these connections become our strength, our hope, and our lasting peace.
Today we're continuing our series, There's No Place Like Home, and we're speaking about fathers. I recently heard a story about an elderly gentleman, an elderly father, living alone in the country, who wanted to plant his garden on Father's Day, which he had always done in the past, but the ground was too hard and he was too old to work the ground. And his only son who would help him work the ground, till it for him, was in prison for robbing a bank. And so the father, in his distress, wrote his son a letter about the situation. And this is what he said. Dear Jake, I've been very depressed lately because it looks like I will not be able to plant my garden. You know how much your mother always loved planting the garden this time of year, but I'm getting too old to be digging up a garden plot. I know if you were here, my troubles would be over because you would be happy to dig the plot for me, love, Dad. Well, a few days later, he receives a letter back from his son. Dear Dad, don't dig up the garden. That's where I buried the things. Love, Jake. Well, about the 4 a.m. the next morning, the FBI's out there and the local police are out there digging all over this area, just going crazy, trying to find the things. But after not finding anything, they apologized to the elderly gentleman and went back. Well, the next day, the old man received his Father's Day card from his son. It said, Dear Dad, happy Father's Day. Go ahead and plant your garden now. That's the best I could do under the circumstances. Love, Jake. And Father, I want you to know that whatever you are doing under your circumstances is good enough. People say it's challenging being a father in our day and age, but I've got to believe it's been challenging to be a father in any day and age, especially if you're trying to follow Jesus and live the kind of life he wants us to live. But beyond that, having your children follow Jesus and believe in Jesus too. It's tough for fathers today. And it was tough for the Israelite fathers in our passage that we'll be looking at this morning. The years around 1400 BC, God has freed the Israelites who were slaves in Egypt for 430 years. They have been wandering through the desert for the past 40 years, and they're come now to the promised land, the land that God had promised them, their inheritance. But before they entered the promised land, Moses, their leader, wanted to make sure that they would continue to follow God into the promised land, continue to seek him in the promised land, to continue to live the lives he has for them in the promised land. And to the Israelite people generally, and to the fathers specifically, Moses writes, Dads, obey the Lord. Dads, obey the Lord. And this is what he writes. These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess. Now, hear those words, 4 words, teach you to observe. It is not just teach you, but teach you to observe, to adhere to follow, to base your decisions upon, to anchor your lives upon. Each of us possesses a lot of knowledge. But each of us possesses more knowledge than possesses us. I know a lot of things. Well, at least I like to tell myself that. I know a lot of things, but a lot of the things I know do not impact my decisions, have nothing to do with my life. But this knowledge that God is talking through Moses to the people about, to the fathers about, is God knowledge. Knowledge just not for the sake of knowledge, but knowledge for the sake of life. It is God knowledge that is to help them be compassionate like God, to be merciful like God, to be loving like God. It's God knowledge that is not to be just consumed, but is a kind of knowledge that is to consume them, to inspire them, to encourage them, to change them. And God has directed Moses to teach the Israelites to observe his commands so that, and he gives them 3 so that's here in the passage. Observe so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, so that you may enjoy long life, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey. So that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord as long as you live. And this understanding of fear is to have a healthy respect for, to live in a right relationship with the Lord your God. And this comes by obeying God. This comes by following the commands of God. And this is to become our faith, but is also for others. Dads, your faith may begin with you, and it may be your relationship with God, but your relationship that you have with God is also for the sake of not only you, but your children and your children's children after them. So you are to obey God and follow God so that out of your relationship with God, your family would have the opportunity to have a relationship with God as well and enjoy a long life. Life is hard. We all know that. And those who have lived longer, I think, know that than those who have not lived as long yet. Life can be so hard in so many situations that confront us that we can't count on, that we don't even know, that crush us when we're not even looking for them, don't expect them. Sicknesses, cancer, a little 2-year-old child with leukemia, suffering in the world, wars, things that happen all around us and outside of us, and that makes life hard, and life is hard by itself without the decisions that we make ourselves that make life even harder. A husband cheats on his wife. Life gets harder. Children being born out of wedlock. Life gets harder. Getting drunk, getting stoned, getting hooked on anything and everything, life gets harder. Wasting hours a day doom scrolling on your cell phones, life gets harder. Life is hard for everyone. Some more so than others. But it's here in the midst of this hard that as we follow God, yet that we can still enjoy a long, rich, and meaningful life in the midst of the hard, in fact, right in the middle of the hard. So that you may enjoy a long life. But also, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey. See, a life lived in a right relationship with God results in a long, enjoyable life that experiences the blessings of God. And it says milk, milk was a basic staple of food at that time, and honey was a luxury. So Moses basically saying to the people, going to the land, that you will have pastures from which your animals can feed, And there will be plants from which the bees can collect pollen. You'll have everything you need for the lives that you're getting ready to live in the promised land. And how in the world could they not follow God, who's promised them these wonderful blessings in their lives, if they would just follow them? Then Moses writes and gives them and us the greatest commandment of all. Let's say this together. The greatest commandment, Jesus says. Here we go. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. So dads, obey the Lord. That's the first commandment. But the second is dads, teach your children to obey the Lord as well. And Moses continues. Impress these things on your children. Now that root word for that word impress is literally to pierce. To pierce. To pierce these commandments upon them. To place these commandments inside of them. It's almost like, figuratively, in a modern way of thinking, tattoo the commandments on their lives, on their outside, on their inside, so that there's no way they can ever take them off. He tells them how. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. The first thing they think about in the morning is God. The last thing they think about at night is God. When you sit down to eat, you pray, and you're reminded of God. Talk about God when you have prayer, when you are with them, when you're on the road, when you're playing with them in the sandbox, swimming at the beach, and resting with them on the floor. Help you to see and understand God in every nook and cranny of their lives. Not too long ago, I was out at a park in our neighborhood with our 3-year-old grandson, Levi. And we were playing in the sandbox and hanging out. And there was a swing set right near the sandbox. And there was a mother with, I think, probably an 8-year-old daughter. She was swinging back and forth. And every time the child came back, Mom would ask her a scientific question. And then she would push the child, and the child would answer the question as she swung out. And they'd come back, and she'd ask her another question. I mean, about science, about primary colors, about astronomy, the solar system, the sun, the moon, the planets, all these kind of things. Back and forth. Ask a question. The girl would answer, laughing and giggling. And I'm sitting in the sandbox with Levi, hanging out and playing. I'm thinking, Mom, give her a break. Come on. Just have some fun out here. But later I thought about it. Maybe Mom was doing the best she could to prepare her daughter in the future to be a scientist, to be a professor, to be someone to really contribute to society. And if we are to help our children to obey God, maybe in a similar fashion, we are talked about Jesus and his Father and his commands. And then Moses keeps going. He says, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. All right, I'm going to show you an extreme example of this. This is what this looks like for an Orthodox Jew in our day and age. Okay. This is an Orthodox Jew. Notice on the top of his head, that's a little box. And notice wrapped around his arm that's leather, and at the crook of his arm on his muscle is another box. And in the boxes are written scriptures. And those things, does anyone know what those little boxes are called? Phylacteries. Phylacteries. And I've seen this lived out. Carol and I were taking a plane from here to Israel a few years back, El Al. And in the middle of the night, we're trying to sleep, but in the middle of the night, I guess really as the sun was rising, all the male on the plane got up, fathers, sons, all together, and they went to a section of the plane, and there they took out the phylacteries, put them on their heads, and put the bands on the arms, phylacteries on their arms, and they began to recite prayers and to recite the greatest commandment. And it was a humming sound that filled the plane as they were being obedient to God, as they understood and interpreted. Now, that's out there. But at least they're trying to do what Moses commanded. I saw the fathers right there with their little boys doing exactly that. You know, he said, place them on the forehead. That's where we think. And he said, you know, place them on your hands. That's where we do things, create things. The hands of our children, to help them learn what it is to serve God by going with them and to do acts of service with them. The homeless, the poor, those who are hurting. Their foreheads, read to them stories about Jesus, Bible stories, drama, things they do in children's church. Can Kirsten with the little ones, telling them stories about Jesus and about God. Reinforcing learning for life. And then he says, write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Now, they also place small boxes on the door frames coming into their homes, Orthodox Jews, and on each room in the house. Now, if anyone knows what these are called, I'll be much impressed. Anyone knows what these little boxes are called? They're called mezuzahs. Mezuzahs. And in each box is a scripture. And when they walk into the room or walk into the house, they reach up in reverence and touch the box. And what it represents is the understanding that each and every room in the house has been given to the Lord, is a sacred space, is to be a place to be honored, where God is to be honored. And so they have these in their homes. But you know what doors also do? Doors are the entrance ways into the home. And I think part of what Moses is saying is said, you know, be careful what you allow in your home. Be careful what you don't let anything in your home to draw your children away from God, from the programs they watch on TV, what they look at on their tablets, their cell phones they'll one day own. Be careful what you allow into their lives, that it would not draw them away from the Lord. You know, when you used to walk in the home, what would be the most prominent thing in usually the living room in the main area of the home you would always see sitting there? I'm sorry? It used to be the family Bible. Used to be the family Bible. Now, you walk in the home, what's the most prominent thing you see? Cody said, the television set. Now think about that. The family Bible, passed down generations, sitting there in the home, and where we are now. But keep out of the home anything and everything that would take them away from God. So dads, obey the Lord. Teach your children to obey the Lord. But finally, dads, do not forget the Lord. And he writes, when the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you a land with large flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things that you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees you did not plant. Then, when you eat and are satisfied, what? Be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. You see, when life is good, and we are satisfied, it's easy to forget the Lord. I know when we're under pressure and when things are tough for us, we pray and we see God and try to gain strength from God. But when life gets good, we start thinking more about the goodness of life and less about the goodness of God. And Moses is saying to them, be careful, be especially careful that you do not forget the Lord. It's not easy being a dad. It's not easy obeying God. It's not easy helping your children and your children's to obey God. But unfortunately, it is so very easy to forget God. So dads, right now, I want to pray for you. I want to pray for you in the lives you're living and what you're doing. And if you're able, your father, grandfather, if you're able to just stand, and if you're not, just to sit. Pray for every father, grandfather, great-grandfather here in this space this morning. Dear God, you've called us to more. You've called us in the midst of our society, which is forgetting God. You've called us to obey God. In the midst of our culture, where children are being drawn away from you with the social media, cell phones, tablets, TVs, and their minds are being reshaped and reformed, you have called us to not only obey you, but to set the example and do the things in the lives of our children to remind them of you. And Father, above any and everything else, as we go along the road of life, you command us to never, ever forget you. And that's why we worship. That's why we gather on Sunday mornings. That's why we take communion, to remember again and again and again, one day out of the 7 days out of the week, who we are and what we've been created to do and the lives that we've been created to live. We have been created to obey you, to have a relationship with you. And I pray for each father here, wherever they're in their spiritual journeys, that they would obey you more, follow you more, have a greater compassion for you. But not only for them, but for their children, and their children's children, and their children's children. Whatever's going on in their lives today. That every time we would speak to them, we would say things in such a way to draw them closer to you. That we would be Jesus to them. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Man, it is so worth it. Dear God, help us to bless them as you bless us, as you blessed us. And all God's people said,